What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode here on Salt City Euros. So today we're going to be working on the E30 Touring. Got a lot planned for this episode. We're going to be installing a new lock nut on the oil pump. It's one of those nuts that has the metal wire attached to it that you then tie around the little sprocket so that it can't back off under heavy use. We're going to be installing a new oil pan gasket. And last but not least, we're going to be installing 24 valve specific motor mounts from Condor Speed Shop. But before we can do any of that, we gotta roll the intro. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm removing as many of the oil pan bolts as possible before I touch the engine, the mounts, or anything like that. Once I get to the ones that I can't reach, I'll be lifting up the engine for a little bit just to untighten everything and then set it back down on the existing engine mounts. I should be able to wiggle the engine oil pan out during that time frame, and fingers crossed everything goes well, so let's see what happens. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind is to always unbolt your oil pan starting on the ends and working your way inward, because the installation procedure is you start in the center and then torque your bolts going out to the edges. Hopefully you can see this on camera, but the oil pan is just about touching the steering rack. And that is because these motor mounts right here, they're the stock, I think they're 535 E28 mounts. They have just about collapsed. So the oil pan is almost sitting on the steering rack. So that is one of the major reasons why I am going to be installing stiffer aftermarket motor mounts in order to raise the engine back up and overall just replace those worn out engine mounts. Alright guys, so this is all secure. However, huge disclaimer, this is extremely dangerous. I have the jack also supporting the transmission from underneath, as well as a jack stand. Another way you could do this is by having a bar which spans across the engine bay and suspends the motor. However, make sure that somebody's around just to help you in case something happens. Like I said, I don't want to be responsible for anybody getting hurt. Make sure you secure everything as much as you possibly can and be extremely safe and cautious. I have two more 10mm bolts that I need to remove from the oil pan before I can take the oil pan out. So proceed with caution. Let's get this done. Okay, so I'm gonna carefully let the motor back down on its motor mounts, just to make sure I'm not stressing out any of those components that are holding it up right now. Lowering the jack and the cherry picker or engine hoist, whatever you want to call it, very carefully onto those motor mounts. There you go. And then that way I don't have to worry about anything dropping while I take care of the oil pan, the oil pump nut. I'm gonna clean the oil pan, clean everything up a little bit just to make sure, you know, we're doing everything while we're in there, so. Right, so now that we got the oil pan off, the oil pump needs to be addressed. As I mentioned, I have this lock nut, which comes with a wire that you will then twist around the sprocket in order to prevent it from ever backing off again. It's pretty straightforward install, but obviously it takes quite a bit of work just to get there. So big tip, if you're ever doing oil pan gasket, doing a motor swap or anything like that, this is a really good item to do while you're in there. Now I know the importance of this lock nut is kind of debated. There's some people say that M motors specifically, if they're abused on the track, this nut can back off and ruin your motor because the oil pump's just not supplying enough oil. While others claim that that is just really something that happens to like less than 1% of the motors out there. Regardless, this is like, I think it was like 10 bucks. So it's really cheap insurance. It's a good item to do while you're in there. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just showing you this is what I'm doing. So suit yourself pretty much. Enough of me talking, let's go install this. So remember that this is a reversed threaded nut, so you actually turn it to the right to loosen it. And then you're going to be turning the new one to the left to tighten it back up. According to the instructions, this is to be tightened to 17 foot-pounds of torque. So you're gonna wanna put a little bit of sealant on all four corners of the oil pan mating area. There's one on the driver's side front, one on the passenger side front up there, and then the same thing in the back. So make sure you do those, otherwise you might have oil leaks later on. Anyways, let's get to the next part of this video. Condor Speed Shop 24 valve specific motor mounts. So these are angled to accommodate the E36 motor mount arms, which sit at an angle, and these should nicely replace the collapsed mounts that I currently have in there. They're obviously gonna introduce some type of vibration, actually not some type, quite a bit, because these are extremely hard material versus the somewhat stock material of the E28 motor mounts. But I'm really excited to get these on because the engine is finally gonna be sitting properly in the chassis. So since the engine is still suspended at this point and supported by the jack, I figured I'm gonna throw these in, and it should be a pretty straightforward process. Make sure you align the little guide pin with the guide hole on the subframe, and that's it. Should be pretty straightforward. Let's do this. Alright guys, quick little tip. I always struggle with getting both motor mounts in. The passenger side is not as much of an issue. It usually lines right up and goes straight in. The driver's side, however, that one can be a real pain in the butt because the engine, as you know, sits at an angle like this and the motor mount arms aren't perfectly aligned. So in order to do this, the way I do it is I get the left one in and I get the nuts barely tightened just so it doesn't come undone again. And then I lift very lightly by the headers, and it causes the engine to very slightly tilt over, and you can see right here the stud from the motor mount sits perfectly inside the motor mount arm. If you guys know another trick or otherwise, please post it in the comments, but like I said, just trying to share information and hopefully this helps some of you guys. Wanted to show you guys really quick the difference in mounts. As you can see, this was the passenger side mount. It is literally collapsed, and that is the problem with, and it is torn. Look at that. It has cracks in the rubber. So these are definitely old and decrepit, and they were well due for a change. So I'm really stoked on those new mounts. They're, like I said, hard mounts, so they should not be falling apart like this. There should be no collapsing. There should be no splitting of the rubber. So yeah, I'll give you guys kind of a first impressions video. Once I have all the mounts done that I want to do on this car, there's quite a few that are coming up. I forgot to mention one more thing, and I hope you guys are already doing this regardless. Make sure you torque every nut and bolt down according to spec. Everything that I've done today, and usually what I do in all my videos, is I put the torque specs in the description, so make sure you read the description. Make sure you torque down critical components like motor mounts, oil pump nut, extremely important, and even the oil pan, those little bolts, they all have to be torqued to spec, and you have to make sure you do them in the right sequence. So guys, don't skip that step. It's not worth it. You're gonna have to come back because of leaks, or because components are moving around, and on stuff like suspension, it can actually be dangerous if that stuff rattles loose. And like I said, I don't want to be responsible for somebody getting hurt. So here's my disclaimer. Again, torque all your bolts, all your nuts. Information is in the description.